Hi, Johnny. Thank you so much for being here. Please briefly introduce yourself and how come we are talking today.
I am Johnny Hickey. I am a retired New York City fireman who's now a marketer. I work for a few clothing brands and do mostly just digital marketing.
Awesome. I like how subtle you are about it. You've been running an eight-figure e-com brand's marketing for quite a while. It's pretty impressive. And I think it's interesting how you took a career from fire department into a little bit of real estate, which you didn't mention, and then like into e-com, and you've reinvented yourself three times already.
I got chased out of real estate. I did real estate from 2006 until 2020 and had a lot of success with real estate early on. And then later on, it became tougher to manage. And one of the reasons I switched to digital marketing was there's so much in person. I started out with one house, and at one point I had like 50 houses, 50 properties. Some of the properties had like 14 tenants, 14 individual tenancies. So some tenants could be three people in that one apartment. You're managing like basically like 50 properties, and some of the properties have 50 people in them. And there were stores and retail stores and delicatessens, a lot of traffic in and out, warehouse. So it was just a lot of management on site sometimes. And one of the reasons I switched to digital marketing was I was like, man, you could just do this from anywhere. Nobody ever calls you at like Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock, and they're like, hey, my toilet just overflowed. And, it started a fire. The fire department's here and all that kind of nonsense. Like, cops would call me and they'd be like, one of your tenants is dead. Can you come up here and let us into the apartment? I'm like, oh my gosh, this
Wow.
is no good.
I'm curious about like the process of reinventing yourself. Like you pick up a whole new career, like from one to the other to the third. So what was the biggest challenge for you? Did you like see it even as a challenge, or did you approach it with a lot of excitement? What was that like for you when you were jumping from one industry to another?
I live in spreadsheets. So the thing about real estate to digital marketing is I could just take, my spreadsheets that I had, obviously throw them away, but I knew how to, formulate new spreadsheets, and I would start with like the first thing, like today, this month. That was what I always did with real estate. I would have like monthly, income, expenses, repairs, and, where was I able to profit. I would look at like, okay, I lost money last month. Why did I lose money? Oh, I had two tenants move out. One tenant paid late. Maybe, I had a maintenance issue that I didn't take care of in time and it caused a leak. And then all of a sudden I had to pay huge repairs. So I would just look at the history of the business and try to figure out why things were not going well and constantly improve that. So it's the same thing with digital marketing. I feel like, you have spreadsheets, you have formulas, you start to judge what's, profitable, what's not profitable, start to look at what you're doing, try to figure out where you're wasting your time and where, your time is maximized.
Awesome. So, as a CMO advising multiple e-com brands, what are some of the biggest achievements that you've been part of?
Mm. Inside of the brands that I was advising, at one point a brand came to me because I had put an offer out on Twitter. I'll look at your back of the house and see what you're doing. If you need help, let me know. And I did it no charge because I wasn't, I didn't really have a lot of confidence in my ability to find problems and fix them. So I wanted to see what would happen. And a lot of companies responded. I think probably 50. I dealt with 50 companies at some level or another. Some people had me dive all the way into all their stuff and others just a tiny bit. But one company gave me leeway with their email. And they had said, hey, we're doing 6 figures a month and our email is 30,000, 40,000 a month. And we want to increase that. And we're paying this guy 5,000 a month in email for a retainer for email. And I was like, whoa, we got to fix that. Like that's an area I could definitely do well in. So I got involved in their email and I convinced him after about 30 days. I worked with a tiny bit with his in-house guy and I wasn't able to. I just put the screws to him basically and said, listen, man, it looks like you're really being lazy. You're not doing anything. You need to pick that up. And he immediately threw out some campaigns and the revenue's like doubled in a couple of weeks. his email revenue doubled. So after about a month, I still didn't like what he was doing. There was errors in there that I didn't like. So I was like, I think you should switch it. So we moved it and we cut the expense down to $2,000 a month, actually $1,500 for a few months. And the email revenues went up to like 80 grand a month. And it was just like perfect, like decreased expenses, quadrupled the amount of money coming in, maybe not quadruple because he was doing like 20 and 30, but now he's doing like 80. And that's, he went from doing low 5 figures to almost 6 figures in email. So that was a huge win for me. Another one would be my first foray into digital marketing for DTC brands, because I touched on digital marketing when I was in real estate a couple of times. But I started a brand with my wife and her friend in 2020, and they said, they give me $50 a day to run Facebook ads. So I put on my Facebook business manager like one ad, $50 a day, and we brought in like a couple $100 worth of sales. So I was like, okay, cool. What's next? Can I increase it? And they're like, whatever you bring in, you can spend. If you bring in 250, then spend 250 on ads. So I was like, okay, cool. So we did that for a tiny bit, and I got the spend up to like 1,500 a day. So this site went from no site, no URL, nothing, no brand, to 80,000 a week in 6 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that. Very short period of time. We sold $1 million worth of that brand in 6 or 7 months. So it went from 0 to $1 million in 6 or 7 months. And I was running the Google ads and the Facebook ads at the time. So I would say that was, really great. And it was my first thing with digital marketing.
A lot to dissect. My first question to follow up on that was, what was in email? Like, was it just sheer volume that you found? And the second thing is, when you learned Facebook and Google ads, or like you learned them and you started applying them almost immediately, and then like started spending, what is that, like 4,500 a month? No, 45,000, isn't it? Like if you're spending like 1,500 a day. So you went into a lot of like advertising on Google or Meta and on email. So I'm asking because right now the majority of the people tend to focus on one channel, but it looks like you weren't afraid to jump in either of the channels and just try to poke it and see what it could do. And then you maximize them pretty quickly, very early on. So what did you actually do in terms of emails and also in terms of Meta and Google as campaigns? So those are like two separate questions.
I'm in a little bit of a flux state with Google. I haven't had much luck with it recently. I'm going to probably try again to tackle Google. In the past, I had tremendous success with Google. I would say that Google was my first go-to because I was pretty good with Google ads from real estate. So I knew the platform a little bit better. So I was able to go in, and even though totally different audience, totally different product, just because I knew the platform a little bit better, I was able to do well with Google. So I always used to focus on Google. And my second means, which is kind of weird, I'm sure this is uncommon, but then would be Facebook. So it wasn't until 2021 or so when I started looking at email. So, that brand that was doing $80,000 a week and that did $1 million, I don't think we sent any emails. I think we just I don't think we sent any campaigns. I think we just ticked the boxes on Klaviyo to send the default, flows. How you just click it, click the mouse, and it goes, check this box. Congratulations, you have a flow. I think we default flows. We never sent a campaign because I would have been the person to hire that person, and I didn't hire that person, and I wasn't sending any campaigns back then. So I don't think we might have, but I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody did because I was the digital marketer for that brand. And a lot of the brands I've worked for, I was the only digital marketer who worked for the brand in-house. We would have agencies, but if I didn't hire somebody to do it, it wasn't done. So now, totally different. I would say, I'm doing it right now. I'm setting up a few brands right now. I'm setting up my wife's new brand. I'm setting up a brand for her friend. When I'm doing it, the first thing I do is I open up Shopify. I go in and connect Klaviyo. And then before I do anything with Facebook, I'll ask somebody to just do some basic flows for me, because I think that any dollar you spend on ads, you want to catch as much of that as possible in return. So you want to create like a cycle, and you want to create that funnel, and if you don't put the email in my opinion, you're just from day one throwing money away. So the first thing I would do is email these days.
You're right. You have to the thing is that ads are becoming even more and more expensive. We need to capture a phone, we need to capture an email, we need to capture a name. We need to be able to remarket to these people. Chances are, if I want to show up in front of them again, I need to spend another $20. So yes, Klaviyo is becoming more expensive. There's Sendline, there's Omnisend, there's Attentive, there's the rest of the platforms. But ultimately, it's just so expensive to lose that person. So I agree. You need to just be able to capture those contacts and to remarket to them in the most basic form, whether it's a discount, whether it's a card, whether it's just a simple reminder with once a month, even very, very foundational to get started. So with that being said, do you have a strategy in mind in terms of what you would do to get, so you're launching your wife's second brand, your friend's brand as well. Do you have a blueprint of step one, this is what I do, step two, or step three in terms of your importance?
Yeah. So the first thing that I usually do is start talking to people about it, mentioning it as we're going. They have Instagram channel. So we got the Instagram channel going about 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago. I posted some stuff on Reddit. I created a Reddit username for the brand name, created a Reddit community for the brand name. I started posting a couple of things in there. We're about to create Pinterest. And so what I'll do is take that content that's created for Instagram and begin to post it into different places. This is the first time I started doing it this way. In the past, we just focused on Instagram. But now I figure we have the content, it's created. It costs a certain amount of time, effort, and money to create one piece of content. And it's not that much more difficult to post it in those places. So I'm setting up a little system where all content gets posted into a spreadsheet, and I'm going to train somebody to post them for me. So my strategy would basically just put the idea of the product, the idea of the brand, because we don't really have product yet. We have some samples, but not real product. So you can't put it in people's hands. I can't send it to influencers. I can't send it to I can't drive traffic to the website. So in the beginning, the strategy is to make people aware that there is a new brand, a small group of people. Right now, I think we have maybe 140 or 180 followers on Instagram, very few followers on Reddit. And we have a Twitter account too, very few followers, again, maybe 30 or 40 followers or 20, something like that. And my strategy would be that I want to find early fans. I want to create some early fans. So we're going to tell the story of how we're creating the brand, go behind the scenes a little bit, post some behind the scenes videos, talk about the product a tiny bit, and start to hear what people have to say about it. Because the problem with creating something from nothing is you don't really have that much of an audience that's not biased towards the product. From my side of things, my wife, on the other hand, and her team, and they have a robust team. I doubt that there's even $500 million DTC brand that has the wholesale team that we have for our brands. And I would bet some $1 billion brands, our team would match up to them. We have 5 people in-house who are fantastic at their jobs and each of them have sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of product over the years. And then across the nation, we have these partners, these showrooms, they call them, or independent reps who cover wide areas of the earth. You have this one girl who covers Montana, Idaho, Michigan, Nebraska. She goes all the way down to Texas. So she goes from Texas to Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Michigan, Minnesota, and she knows almost every store that sells in our category. And so when we take something, throw it in a FedEx bag and send it to her, half of the land mass of America is seeing the product because of that one person. And then
Wow.
we have people and she only covers the top of Texas. So we have Texas, we have another whole showroom, and in Southeast United States, New York, there's one person in New York, one person in New Jersey. California is like a couple of people. So they have their robust feedback loop. So they'll show the product, they'll get notes, people will talk about it. There's been, 5 department stores already that have said they want the product. That's all great from their side of things, but I don't have that in DTC. I don't have anything. So like, that first brand that I started, I kind of started to mention it, but I cut myself off because I didn't want to talk about it. The first brand that I did, that I ran Google ads and Facebook ads, the very first thing I did was post it on my Facebook, my personal Facebook page, and said, I am working for this company. Tell me what you think about it. That was the very first thing I did. I just needed something, not necessarily the customer. Who knows? I don't know if people are going to like it or not like it, but I was like, I need to hear something about it. People started telling me what they thought. And then, then obviously I created a new Instagram account just for that brand and started posting about it like 10 times a day. For me, when I do organic, I want a ton of posts. I don't hear people who say, I've talked to people before, like the brand channel is for inspiration. The brand channel is for, the images or whatever it is that they're doing. I'm not about that. I'm selling stuff in the brand channel. Maybe we should have 2 brand channels if that's what people will want to do with channels. I want to sell stuff. Selling makes people's bills get paid. If you don't sell, you're not paying your credit cards. You know what I mean? So for me, I am going to just put a lot of content out there, and then I'm going to listen and see what happens. And then from there, I'm going to craft my next steps, which would be, get the marketing plan in order. I would say some people probably start out with a very detailed plan that they're going to follow. I'm more of like, let's just get it out there right now and start to hear what people say, and then we will craft a plan from there.
In strategy, they call this emergent strategy. So we have emergent or deliberate. It's, I think it was Michael Porter, the Harvard, I think he's educator, and there's essentially this debate of what you want to do. And I think what stands out to me is just your patience, and also the wholesale channels, a really quick feedback loop. So you have, I suppose, like that as well as a really great UVP, but also your patience in getting into the one-on-one feedback from people and interacting with them. Definitely Reddit. I wouldn't have expected Reddit, to be fair. I thought about, like you mentioning TikTok, or going on some of like the new fancy platforms, like LinkedIn is launching videos right now, so who knows. But Reddit is I've noticed that people on Reddit are very hardcore. Like when they get there, like they love just diving and scrolling through it, and it's like, like Twitter on drugs. So very interesting approach in terms of listening for the feedback and trying then to apply it to iterate the product before even launching it.
I stole Reddit.
Sorry, say that again.
Stole it from somebody. I consulted with the brand this year, and they have a group with like 800 people in it. Excuse me. And so when they told me, they said, yeah, one of the things we do is when we have like a Reddit group, so we'll drop a photograph of it in and say, hey, what do you guys think? We'll put 4 or 5 photographs in there and say, what's the deal? What do you guys think of this? And based upon that Reddit group, they cut product, and they've been very successful with that, early feedback. So that's why I did it. It hasn't worked for me yet, but we'll see.
Mr. Beast, who's the biggest, I think he has the biggest YouTube channel. If he doesn't have the biggest YouTube channel, he has one of the biggest YouTube channels. Spoke early in his career, he would meet with his friends and they would video edit and watch stuff for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours throughout the night, giving each other feedback. A group of friends, 5 to 6 guys, all of them like launching channels, and they would have that feedback loop. Wow. Beatles, we used to go and play for 8 hours to 12 hours to 16 hours days in Germany, in Munich, when they were in their like very early stages, and nobody knew about them, but they would play for hours. And I think you have this notion of a lot of people doing a lot of homework upfront, and you're actually moving so much further ahead. And then by the time you actually launch it to the bigger audience, the product, which whether it's like music, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's, apparel, you've iterated it in so many times by direct feedback that I think it's a strategy. This is from Outliers, by the way. That's where I know it from. And I was going to say, I think this is something that not a lot of people think about right now, or at least not a lot of people mention it and speak about it. Everyone loves to talk about the Facebook ad or the reach or the CPMs or the click, the costs, but very few people talk about the whole journey of finding out a really good product and developing something that actually benefits people. And I think ultimately what you're also getting in Lisa's brand, your wife's brand, is getting with that all that like distribution. I mean, when you're saying we have someone in Idaho, we have someone in Texas, that's not a city, that's a state with like millions of people. So there's a lot of stores, probably like talking about thousands of stores that immediately give that feedback. So they know what's needed in the market, what's trending. And I think that's how you launch something that is truly valuable, because you have a straight away like the build-up demand that people are actually wanting. And very few people tend to listen to this, but the whole patience is probably what actually gets you ahead up front. So
Yeah, they call them the flyover states here. Like Idaho, people call them the flyover states. I don't call them. I think the big brands miss out on some of that. Like, know that, I'm in a lot of Slack groups and whatever, and people will start talking wholesale, and they all do the same pretty much thing. They're all shooting for 2 or 3 retailers, depending on their sector. But, say it was in my sector, they'd be like, hey, we're trying to get into Bloomingdale's. We're trying to get into Macy's. We're trying to get into, Nordstrom, Saks. That's their strategy. Or if they're a lower price item, they're like, we're on Amazon. There's thousands of stores between those two options. And those stores are much more loyal. Like, if you go to Amazon, you can bet Amazon's got like, I've never seen it, but I'm sure they have like a portion of their company who's like probably 500 individuals who are just counting beans as to how much each brand is making, because they know your costs, they know what you're selling for, they know your expenses. They're probably just looking at your margin and saying, holy cow, this guy's getting big over here. He's about to reach 50 million. Let's knock his product off and start making it. But you can bet that the 1,000 retailers that we sell to in the United States, they can't do that. They're not looking at our product being like, okay, we're going to knock these guys off. Amazon can slit your throat in a second. And everybody goes to them and is like, yeah, I'm going to sell my product to Amazon. The problem with the big retailers, from my viewpoint, is that if they say there's a lot of retailers out there. Say retail has 500 doors, which everybody's like, oh my gosh, I got into 500 doors. And usually not the way it works. They usually test you in a certain amount of doors. They have testing stores. So they'll test you in some doors and then they start increasing. But with department stores, obviously any business, they want to make a lot of money. And one day, sometimes what happens is they order too much. And when they order too much, they get stuck with it. And department stores don't like to get stuck with stuff. So they do 2 things. The first thing they come back is they say they want margin assistance. So that means that basically you're going to pay them money when they sell the product. So you sold it to them. They sold it for a discount, but they want their margin. They want the money that they originally spec'd to sell that product. So they're going to ask you for that back. The other thing that they're going to do is they're going to discount. So this is going to create a lot of friction, because now on Google, when somebody Googles your product, you're going to have your listing at X dollars. You're going to have the department store's listing at X dollars. You have to take money from your side and give it to them to build their margin up. So the stores, these flyovers, states that are there, I think people are hugely missing the boat with this. They're missing the boat. There's many people in cities all across the United States who are just as wealthy as the people in LA and New York, maybe even more, because they're not crazy, spending money on products. And they don't have to go to Erewhon and pay $10 for, a cup of milk. You never heard of Erewhon?
No.
It's a crazy store in LA. People go there and they buy stuff and it's like 10 times more expensive. It's, like really nice products, really nice packaging, very expensive. But in some place like, I don't know, I don't think they have a Chicago Erewhon store, but Chicago has a lot of stores. So we go to shows in Chicago 4 times a year. We actually own a trade show that operates in Chicago. We dedicated ourselves so much to this market at one point that we were like, we didn't like any of the other shows. So we created our own trade show that travels from city to city. It goes from Boston, Philly, Chicago, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Chicago. We went to San Diego a couple of times. We went to Texas a couple of times. We might go back, but for the moment. And then we have a couple of other states like Minnesota and Michigan that we're doing it in, Auburn Hills, I think. So we dedicated ourselves to this distribution to stores so that the brand would have more staying power. And as a result, it's, we can maintain our margins. We don't have to worry about selling on Amazon. We don't have to worry about selling to big department stores. We could, or we don't have to. And it gives us a lot of breathing room that these other brands, I think, probably could benefit from.
I think this is a very valuable lesson. There are two topics that came to my mind, like as I was listening to you. One is of those loyal initial customers, whether that is wholesale or B2C, direct like community. That seems to be a very important like aspect, because you're building all that demand upfront by providing and by like educating or even like engaging with these people, even if it's just like the excitement. But then the second very valuable thing that I'm hearing is that you don't effectively allow anyone to have too much influence or too much power. If there is a single department store that, even if it's like a bigger chain, you effectively can always break the relationship with them if they are not meeting your terms. And that, like, that's not really capacity, but that possibility of you walking away from the relationship is the strongest negotiating factor. That combined with the great branding that we have in the company that we are working together, but also the branding as a whole, in a way, has become somewhat of a status. And a lot of people would go and associate themselves now with this. And I can say that because I'm seeing how when we send a campaign that has nothing to do with sales or a promotion, but a simple piece of UGC or styling guide, or just a few small and short, very punctual sentences, turn into a very big, very quick revenue. So I think it's the combination of you standing your ground and making a statement with the actual brand, and then building that relationship with customers through the content, through the products, through everything that has made like a really, really solid brand. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into building this like excitement about like the product. So it's a relatively higher ticket purchase for the product. So what are some of like the challenges that come with this, or like how would you approach when it comes to higher ticket apparel? Like, is there something unique about selling into the high ticket that you think like made sure that you would bring like the success that you've brought like so far?
Yeah, I think you have to start with the mindset that it's not that expensive. If you start out with the idea that it's really expensive and you're trying to sell it to people, it's going to be a tough sell. So I think if you look at, I don't really look at competition. I hate to look at competition. I don't really go to their websites. I try to avoid them. I know a lot of people do. I don't do that usually. There's an old saying, I think it's from a book called Og Mandino, that says it's about, if you demand $1 from life, you'll get $1, but if you demand more, you'll get more. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically like life will pay you what you ask. So I would start, if somebody's going to sell a product that's expensive, because this is what we do, we would start with the idea that what is the customer and what can they afford? What are they looking for? And then we look at that customer. Like, first you want to search, obviously, and figure out the customer. We knew our customer going in here. We weren't trying to pick a customer. We knew the customer. So then it's like, what does that customer want?
In a way, you are the customer as well. Like, not you in particular, but like your wife is also the customer in a way, right? So
my wife is definitely the customer. Yes. And so she knows what she wants. If you look at demographics, say in the United States, I don't know the real numbers, but I've looked it up before, but I can't recall right now. But I think you want to sell to the top 10% of the United States if you're selling an $80 t-shirt, because you don't want people complaining about the price. We do have people complain about the price, but that's not really our core customer. If I get on the phone with somebody, customer, like I talk to customers pretty often, or email, but also by phone. And if I get on the phone with a customer and I'm talking to them, they're like, I can't believe the price is so high. I love your stuff, but it's just so expensive. And I'm basically like, listen, if you want to buy this product, I'm very happy to sell it to you, but it is expensive. The product is expensive. It's meant to be expensive. It's not meant to be cheap. We're not the value brand. We're not like Target. There are places to buy cheap stuff. We're not that brand. I'd love to sell you this product, but if you can't afford it, I'm not going to tell you should buy it. I'll give you a 20% off if I can, because I appreciate that people who don't have the money to purchase the product aren't in the ideal customer product, demographic, appreciate it. So I'm always like, okay, cool. You know what? You deserve the product. You love it. I'll give you 25 off. Do me a favor and leave us a review if you can. So we do that. But I would start with the targeting of the consumer being somebody who can afford it. And then you don't think about the price. And just to give you for instance, I'm wearing an $85 t-shirt right now. This t-shirt's $85. Before I worked in apparel, I wore $10 t-shirts. So I was not the customer. I am not the customer. I remember years and years ago, there's another brand. We don't compete with this brand, but I don't want to name them just because they're, maybe I will one day. I want to give them any airspace. But they sell a hoodie that's $110. And I was like, that thing is so nice. I want that hoodie. I saw it in person. I tried it on. I was like, this hoodie's great. $110. I really wanted it. I never bought it. It was $110. I wore Carhartt that was like $50 on sale. And I would buy the heavyweight, like nice ones that would last years, made in China. And that was because that was the customer that I was. So then when we started making hoodies for men, our hoodie is $170. And it's 10 times nicer than either of those hoodies. Well, it's 3 times nicer than one of them. It's 10 times nicer than the other one. So the Carhartt hoodie had the weight of our hoodie, but the fabric is much different. It's also not made in China. It's made in the USA. And the one that was made in the USA that was 110 is 70% of the weight of our hoodie. So the cotton is much thinner. You're working with a lot less cotton. You're 70% less weight. So that product is obviously going to be cheaper. So our hoodie is 170. This one's 110. It makes a lot of sense. We also have a tiny bit better ribbing on the wrists. Like their ribbing was like, say this wide, and our ribbing's like that one. It's like 3 inches straight. I mean, actually close to 4 inches. Theirs is like 1.5 inches. So that's also expensive. The ribbing is an expensive part of that operation. So I would say start with the idea. Instead of trying to build value into the product, start with the idea you're selling something to somebody who can afford it, and you're delivering what they want. You're not asking them to pay for something that's not worth what you're asking for.
Yeah. So I'm getting excited. I think this is so valuable. If I was like launching a brand right now, getting into all the different tactics, but all the different expenses and like understanding the product as well, you suddenly see how individual like smaller aspects there are when you're building a product. With the hoodies, I know there's something that I've noticed, and I've only noticed it because I'm in the market for a car right now. I've spent the last 6 months researching every single possible difference of like transmission of petrol, diesel, car brands, value, price, class, like the way that it drives, like the type of the vehicles, whether it's a sedan, SUV, or a truck, or you get into the hatchbacks. I've narrowed down, and I've spent so much time on research to the point where for me now, if I'm to spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a car, which is pretty much like prices of the last 4 or 5 years of cars, or like a decent car, not a premium luxury Porsche that you would spend $100K, but a decent car, the everyday driving, I can understand the value of this right now. I know what was the level of comfort with the different ride, like the consumption. I know that like the resale value. And I think as you work in particular brands, so whether it's in apparel or in supplements or even bedding right now, where we send in a similar price range, you start to understand the additional value that there is, and you can communicate it in an easier way. And you also know that, let's say that I'm the customer right now. If someone is willing to sell me a Fiat, and I don't mind like Fiat, like predictable small cars, like there's probably other ones, but probably like more known for like city cars. I wouldn't be the customer for it, even though it might be $10,000 to $15,000. Like I have a budget of, let's say that I want to spend $30,000. Like that's like what I want to spend. I want to get like the best thing. I know that the market is roughly there. So when you are a type of a customer who is willing to spend $50 to $100 pieces of clothing that are gonna last and that are gonna be durable, that are gonna feel nice, that not gonna wear, that you can actually rely on and trust, you don't necessarily want to spend $20. And I think a lot of people are doing the mistake of chasing like a race to the bottom, where they're trying to discount more and more and more. And to like still give an example, one of the tactics that we did with you was to mention, he said like right off the back, like as a plain text saying, hey, thanks for like this type of like purchase, or like it's like we like here is something from us since you are here to appreciate your business. like trusting us, if you could leave something about us, that's fine. And we've automated what you were doing as a customer support to add some additional revenue. But ultimately, it's again understanding the market and the customer, and that adds up back to all the research and all the panic and homework that we were talking about.
I agree with what you're saying. Especially about car dealerships, like the parallel I would draw to it is you don't ever see, I don't ever go to the dealership and notice people who are like, listen, I drive a GMC Sierra, kind of I would say it's kind of expensive, middle upper class car. When you go to the dealership, people aren't there like, this car is not worth what you're asking for it. I'm not going to pay that. I want it for half the price. So it's the same thing with clothing. Like, nobody goes into the Bugatti dealership telling them that they don't think the car is worth what Bugatti is asking. When you go to buy something, if the marketing is done well, there is no convincing the person. You don't have to tell them it's worth what it's worth because they know. And I agree with what you were saying there, is that you're not the fiat customer. I would tell people it's easier to sell people with more money stuff than it is to sell people with no money. And you also fill landfills with trash, making trash. If you're making trash coming from, I don't want to name a country, but one country is synonymous over the years with trash. And the last few years, the quality has gotten much better. But I personally feel like I want to sell a product that's made here in the United States. When the dock workers go on strike, I don't have to worry about it. When the container ships can't get unloaded because there's too many container ships, my stuff's in a box truck coming from a warehouse in LA. Like, it goes from like one warehouse in LA to another warehouse in LA, then gets put in a poly bag and shipped. And, if I feel like going and seeing production, I can jump on a flight in the morning and be there in the afternoon. And I could be back at my house the next day in the morning because I could take a red eye and I could just do a quick trip to the warehouse. Stuff is easy to get done. I am a big proponent of made in America. And if you're in Europe, for instance, I would be making stuff in Portugal. I'd be making stuff in Turkey, Bulgaria, wherever production is doable, close by you, so that you could be monitoring it. I know that a lot of people get famous for touring factories in China, and that's cool and all, but I just like to sell American products. That's my niche. So I work for a bunch of American brands. Like right now I'm working for 3. I've worked for 6 American brands at this point, and I don't think I've worked for a brand that sold most of their products from China yet. I have worked for a brand that sold some products from South America, but I definitely have not worked for a brand that's selling mostly Chinese products. There was one website that I worked for that had some Chinese products, a couple, but again, it was mostly US. And I would just say, try to sell expensive products that are well made, and find that
better product. You touched on something with the cars. Like you said, you go to the Bugatti if the marketing is done right. So let's dissect marketing done right. I think we touched on like the strategy, on the channel, on research, but let's talk about real marketing and what makes good marketing. So you've tapped like like Facebook ads, you've seen like, and you've done like email, and you've worked with a lot of agencies. You said you had like a lot of success with Google back in the day. So let's try to define good marketing. Give like your perspective on what makes marketing really valuable.
I don't know if I'm capable of good marketing. I know when I see it from other people. So I am more of a generalist than anything else, and I can start up executing marketing projects. So what I'll do is I'll ask somebody to take a picture. For instance, can you give me 5 pictures? Then I'll take their 5 pictures and I'll open up the book Cashvertising, and I'll create some static ads, and I throw them into Facebook and I start running them. And then I watch what happens. And if, all 5 ads do well, I'm like, oh my gosh, which doesn't happen. So you get 1 decent ad, maybe you get no decent ads, and you do 5 more pictures and 5 more pictures. All of a sudden you get 1 that's decent. So I usually iterate them on that. I've heard people say, don't do that. I usually iterate them on that. At some point, what I'm looking to do is get enough money in the door so I can hire somebody who's better at this than me. And I have some angles, I have some data. So I'll go to Fiverr. That's what I did when I almost every brand, really, it's not almost every brand, I've gone to Fiverr and got a graphic artist and said, hey, these are the statics I just created. can you make some that are better? And then they make some that are better. I throw them in. And then I just start stepping up to the point where I'm walking into an agency who charges $10,000 a month, going from Fiverr to this agency that charges whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm your customer now. I want you to make better marketing for me. You know, marketing budget a month or two ago for creative was $50,000 a month. And I started out on Fiverr paying guys like $10 for statics for the same company.
Wow. And it's just gradually, again, finding the winning ad, finding the winning. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned you would open cash advertising. I opened, I forgot the book, like Eugene Schwartz, Breakthrough Advertising. My favorite, one of my favorite.
Great book. What's that guy's name? I read it.
Eugene Schwartz. No, Schwartz.
Eugene Schwartz. Yeah, exactly. I've read it twice recently.
Amazing book. I have it in the background. Like it's one of the books on the background. And my favorite ad there, look, mom, no more cavities. That's my favorite ad of all time. It speaks directly to the customer, says that the problem, it's a process of transformation. It has a ideal case scenario and it has a pain. So it has all the different like angles. It also teaches about how educated the market is. And so essentially it taps into multiple angles. So when I did the tennis ad today, it was essentially an iteration of that, which is, Mom, Dad, I'm playing Wimbledon. That is my ad right now. And this is the ad that actually is performing best. But I think it's really cool what you mentioned of going for like the very, back in the day, direct response ads that we had and turning them into an image ad. And I think a lot of people not necessarily confused, but think it's either direct response or branding. The two are so interlinked with each other that it's very hard to tell the difference. I think with direct response, like you're just speaking more, and with branding, you're showing more and educating more. But ultimately, a good direct response ad is also going to educate and it's going to make a promise. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on branding and direct response. How do you see the two? How do you think the two interact? Or do you see them as two different things?
You know, I definitely think that branding, it's not my specialty. So it's not what I do, but I appreciate it being done. So I think that the best way for most of the companies that I'm working for right now, because they're not really direct response type businesses, we want to build a lasting business, build a brand. In other words, I think that you need somebody who can find out what that brand is about, find out what it means to consumers, communicate that idea, package that and give it to somebody like me who can then distribute it to people, explain it to people. I don't know that I'm great at coming up with the story, but I am good at telling the story once it's been told. So, you know, you read that book, The Story Brand.
No, I have it in my Audible as one of the books that I need to.
Making of a Story Brand. And then there's another one, which, I mean, I don't know if this would be referred to as branding. I think it is Start with the Why by Simon Sinek. So I'm not usually the guy who comes up with the story, but once the story starts to unfold, I am pretty fair at telling the story about what something is. So I would say I am not in the direct marketing camp. I am in the brand marketing camp, but I'm not the person who's going to come up with it. So I encourage people to do so. You know, in the beginning, I'll be listening to my wife coming up with the brand, with the story of the brand and the branding and who the brand is and why the brand is and what it's speaking to and who the audience is. And I'm like, just listening to it. And I'm not really part of it because it's not my thing. But once they formulate all that and they get it into a brand deck and they come out and they're like, hey, here's what we got. I'm like, okay, cool. And that's where I'm the marketer will take that and amplify that message and take pieces of it and turn it into marketing and try to like, you know, to me, a brand has all these different parts and different people are going to buy that brand for different reasons. So I'm going to pick apart the brand, so to speak, and find the different reasons why people are buying. And then I'm going to create marketing around all of those different pieces.
Mm-hmm. Very important to actually find those little pieces. So in a way, direct response helps you start like your research again. And then you turn that into your branding and your ethos and your beliefs about like the customer. And something you mentioned earlier, if I'm like wrong, like correct me, but something you mentioned earlier like when people are calling on the phone, that they would get a certain question of like, why is this like priced this way? Like you have to be convinced, like you have to believe this is the value of this and even more valuable. And then you start sharing that story once you find the winning angle. There are certain direct response ads back in the day that were, again, quoting now Eugene Schwartz, that are like amazing. You could, there was an ad called, everyone like was laughing when he sat the piano when he sat at the piano until he started playing. That is one of the ads that there was for piano lessons. And there was another one for night school for like someone who was conversing. Oh, there was an ad. I'm speaking out of memory, but there's an ad that was a comparison that one bush made 1,300 roses. So you can find those angles, and then I think right now, like what happened with what direct response was with the, like back in the day, you would go ahead and try to explain a story and like sink into someone. Now you're showing it, and all the different elements that you would combine into that is what actually branding is, like who the person is, what they're saying, where are they, like what do they wear, what they drive, like how they talk, how they wear themselves, they have makeup or not. All of those different elements is what Alex Hormozy calls the bouquet of branding. So a little flower, and then all of the flowers look great together. So I think the relationship between is not one or the other, but one into the other in order to.
Yeah, I think the guys who talk about just direct, they're like, I'm a direct marketer. Like I am a direct marketer, but I'm not in the direct marketer camp where I'm like, direct marketing is much more important than branding. I feel like if you don't know what the brand story is, you could just find one angle, market it, and then let the brand build on itself. That's another way to do it. That's kind of the way I've done this with not this brand, because I didn't come up with the branding for this brand, but I did that with the brand before. They didn't have any branding. So I just took some photographs, I put some graphics together, and then I started marketing it. And the brand story kind of told itself because the customers told the story. The product got popular because we had a couple of marketing angles. And I would say that's the rise of a direct marketing brand. And then it became a brand because people bought a lot of it and they kept coming back and they liked the product. And then it transitions to a brand at some point if you do things the right way. But I definitely think you could spend less money if you have the brand story first. A little bit of it, you don't want to go nuts. I'm not talking 5-figure, pay a bunch of people to come up with a whole branding story, but you just have a little tiny bit of a story, a couple of paragraphs. You have your colors, you have your fonts, and then put that out into the ether, let some people find out about it, buy the product, and then talk to the customer, find out from the customer how they're describing the brand. Because I'm trying to remember which book that was in, but
there was a guy called Marty something was on branding, and I think maybe you're referring to that one.
He's saying basically, brand is what the customers say it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's how I this conversation is that if you have the good branding, you can do great marketing. If you don't, you could sell it a little bit and then listen really hard to find out what the brand is from the customers.
And I think you become unique by just the combination of all the different factors of all the people who are involved into this and the product and the community. All of them. It's not that there's no other brands that are selling the same thing, but they're not all saying the same story. So there's always something different about how people are adapting the product. And that's what essentially becomes the branding. There is a brand that I absolutely love called Tushy. I don't know if you know, like Tushy bidets. Really fun, absolutely absurd in their marketing. But, as we were on topic of great marketing, it's very unique what they do because they talk about hygiene with bidets. But the way that they position it is very unique to the point where I was so impressed that it was part of my dissertation because they were one of the brands that I would essentially survey people, like, what do you think about this brand or this brand? And you can be marketing the same product in the same vertical to the same audience through an entirely different way. And that could be your unique branding. And that's how you can differentiate. Because I feel a lot of people struggle to differentiate and ask, how am I different? If let's say that you have a lot of US-owned manufactured brands, but in e-com, there's a lot of people who would go to a Chinese supplier. That tends to be not necessarily like the norm, but it's a very frequent choice because it's cheaper to produce things there. It's more common. You would see them in different expos, so you would import those products. And then you can't really fight as much on the product iterations, or maybe you can try to understand the product and how it's fitting with the people. But by the time the product ship back and forth, there's 2 to 4 weeks delays. So it doesn't necessarily gives you as quickly competitive advantage. But if you listen to the people in how they're interacting, in how they're discussing it, how they're mentioning to customer support, or as you mentioned on Reddit, I think that's a really cool little hack that you can use, and you can spike up your marketing really quickly, because then it's just an echo of something that is working really, really well. So that is something that I think I'm observing and understanding from what you're saying, and something that I didn't think until now, in terms of how people would communicate about branding. Let's talk challenges. So let's say that, like you actually were lucky, not like you were fortunate to find like the winning angle, but one of the challenges was like not finding an angle. Like, what are some of the challenges that you actually on your way to scale, like you didn't expect would come your way and actually happen?
Things just happen. Do some sort of update and things just change. Like 2021 was really tough for a lot of brands. It was tough for us. There's, as you remember in May, we had that trouble with email. We had the same exact consequence, or same situation, but over different stuff when the February of 2024 came around. So, whatever you're doing, I feel like in marketing, you're never going to stay at the level you're at if you're not trying to keep up. So, if you have expenses and you have a couple of people who you're employing, you're going to have to continue to work to grow things. Those, things that you're doing today might not work in 6 months or 180 days or 6 months or 2 years. You never know. Like all of a sudden things just reset, and somebody might make a product that's similar to yours. We were kind of skating along at one point. We're growing really fast, and we're just taking off. And then a bunch of brands kind of popped up, and we were like, "Oh wow, what should we worry about this?" And it made me think. I was like, "Wow, we're starting to get big. These brands copy us, and they're basically just taking our whole line, and they send it to a technical designer, and they knock off every T-shirt we make and every color, and then they call the agencies where the models are, and they do photo shoots with our models. And, they're like, look at our ads, and they start knocking off the ads. So these challenges will, rise. And I think you have to keep at it. You can't give up. If you rest too much and you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, you're going to hit with the platform changes and CPAs rising, customers just find a new product. There's always something going on. Now, we've only been doing this for 4 years, so I've only experienced a few challenges. But then I talked to other people. I remember I was talking to a guy recently who sells T-shirts also. His business was like $30-40 million a year a couple of years ago, and now he's doing like $1 million or $2 million. So he's letting go a lot of full-time employees. Those are crazy challenges. We've seen that in the showroom, because we have that showroom where we represent like 8 to 10 brands, and we'll have a brand, I don't want to speak about specific brands, but we'll say we had a brand that's doing like $10-20 million a year, and the owner was happy with the way things going, and they maybe didn't make some changes. They never really try to do new products. And now all of a sudden 5 years goes by, and they're not doing $10-20 million a year. Now they're only doing a couple of million a year, and they're not set up financially to only do a couple of million a year. So they start to struggle. So I would say that the biggest challenges is you can't just stay where you are. You're going to have to grow to just keep what you have. And that means that you got to be aggressive, and you got to try new things, constantly doing new stuff. For me, I like to grow fast. So I like 200-300% growth. And that creates a ton of challenges. I had 1 year I sold so much product that it took a month for us to catch up on shipping. And so that challenge was that, I talk about this with Rich Panel a lot, is that the day before Christmas Eve in the United States, most people were like getting ready for vacation. I had 700 emails to be answered. And like, The worst part was I lost electric on Christmas Eve. So I did. How am I going to even catch up over here? I don't have heat. I don't have hot water. I don't have electric, but I got 700 emails to answer. Downloading this app, trying to answer people, freezing my fingers are freezing. So, you're dealing with life and challenges. And I think that any business should try to grow. That's my personal opinion. Businesses should try to grow that I run. I know some people are just interested in their business the way it is and they don't want it to grow. But my businesses, I always want them to grow. I want to hire more people. I want to sell more products. I want to do a better job, get more efficient every year. If I sold, I tell this story once in a while. I worked in a mine in my 20s, underground mining. And the first day,
where, like, do you want to share where? It wasn't just like a mine in the US. I think it was in Russia, wasn't it?
no, I did spend a little bit of time in Russia, but that was above ground. This was in New York City. There's a water tunnel in New York City. It's called Water Tunnel Number 3. And I was in a union, Local 147, the Sandhogs Union. It was a great union. My dad was in it. My grandfather was in it. All my uncles were in it. So in my 20s, and I was kind of hit a rough patch, and I wasn't working. And they were like, "Why don't you go down in the tunnel, kid? You'll make some money. It's good money down there." So I'm like, "Okay." So I showed up my first day of work. I remember it was pretty rough. This guy actually lost his leg when I walked by this guy. He was on a piece of equipment. I walked by him. I walked about 40 feet by him, and all of a sudden I heard him screaming, and he lost his leg. And I was like, "This is for real. This is crazy." Like ambulances, cops came down. They were like, "Get back to work. Go down there and do your job." To me, and I'm like, wow. So I worked down there for a little while. It was a really crazy place where I was working. A lot going on, loud machines, blasting, people hitting, sledgehammers going. There was 100 people down there, it seemed like to me. There was so much going on. And then they moved me to a smaller portion of the tunnel. And I remember my first day of work, this guy was like, "Are you good working by yourself?" I'm like, "Sure."
In the tunnel.
He leads me to there's train tracks. And he leads me to these train tracks, and there's a train, and the water's like knee deep. And he, walking through water that's almost not quite knee deep, but maybe like just below your knee. And we're walking in this tunnel, and there's a train there, like a flatbed train. And he walks up onto the flatbed, and he walks down this flatbed. It's completely empty except with one pallet, and it's like 10 feet tall pallet. And he walks over and he goes, "Grab a bag of concrete." He takes a bag of concrete, he puts it on his shoulder, and he goes, "Follow me." So we walk down to back to the end of the train, which is like 40 feet away. We climb down a ladder. We walk down into the water and go down the tunnel around a little dam that's built out of sandbags, up over the dam. And there's another train there. Go back up another flight of stairs and walk to the end of the thing, which is 50 feet away, and then put it on an empty pallet, wooden pallet. And he goes, "Okay, move that pallet from there to here one at a time. I'll be back at the end of the day." So he came back at the end of the day, and there was 2 guys on the other side of the train, and they would take the bags that I loaded and move them like 5 feet, and then they would break them open and put them into a concrete mixing machine, and they would mix the concrete, and then another guy would do his job from there. So I would just that was what I was doing. And then at some point, one of the guys came up to me and was like, "Hey, what's up, man? What's your name?" I'm like, "I'm Johnny." He's like, "Okay, cool. Every once in a while, take 5 of those bags and walk them over from that pallet over here 10 feet further and stack them up behind me." He goes, "When you see me get below 5, bring me 5 bags." So that's what I did all day long. I moved bags 100 and something feet from one place here, and then I would take 5 bags and put 5 bags, stack them up, and then go all the way back to the beginning. And that's what I did 8 hours a day. I just moved concrete all day long. So I remember at the end of the week, he took a bag and ripped it, and he carried it out, and I didn't know what he was doing. I just saw him ripping the bag up, and he carried it out. He brought it all the way back up to where we go, like, 5 miles away out of the tunnel. We go out to this like little shack, this shanty, and we're all getting changed. We're all dirty and sweaty and whatever, mud all over us. And he like takes a hammer and a nail, and he like pounds the bag into the wall, and he gets out a magic marker and he scribbles something on it. I'm looking at him like, "What the heck is that?" He's like, 135. I'm like, "What is that?" And he's like, "We moved 135 bags of concrete into the tunnel, over here in a day." And I was like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's a record." He goes, "We did good." So now every day I was trying to move 135 bags a day. I'm at 125. He's like, the day is
Oh,
finished.
my back hurts from just listening to that. I'm already not in my 27, and I think this
It's
is
a rock. I was like Dwayne the Rock. At the end of that, like after 6 months, because I ended up getting laid off. But I remember it was summertime. After 6 months, I was like huge because all I did was move 96 big pound bags of concrete, 8 to 10 hours a day, all day long.
my God. To make a parallel to here, this is the same with your marketing muscles, let's say, because if you are lifting all those like heavy load, but what is it like? The road to hell feels like heaven, and the road to heaven feels like hell. I think, I'm like employing roughly 15 people right now, so it's a lot of people to like take responsibility of. And something that I'm figuring out is those KPIs matter so much. So let's say that like it was like 135 bucks, and you wanted to push more and more and more. And at any stage, you just can't be comfortable. There needs to be another goal, and not necessarily because it's. I think as a human nature as well, like we need to know, like we need to want something, whether it's like in a career or in life. You have to apply a target, and it's easiest when it's quantifiable. Like when it's not quantifiable, when it's like I want a better life, that doesn't mean anything. But if it's I want to make a lump, like let's say 100K, 50K, like 1 million a month or like a year, that then puts the perspective of what do I need to do, and you reverse engineer it. And it goes earlier to the book that you mentioned, that if you ask for $1, you get $1, but if you ask for seven, you get seven. I generally believe that if I ask for more, I can get more from life. I'm not sure where it's going to come from, but I know that it will come. And when you are, I think, as a team, as a manager, or even as a leader of a company, there has to be someone who can dictate the direction, and all the company needs to work towards that direction. Putting a number behind it makes a lot of sense for every single person, and then like breaking down into smaller like numbers as well. But there's the things that are unquantifiable that also need to be set up as a target. So let's say that we need to be serving this customer, and they need to have the best type of experience, or like our company, like we want to make sure that everyone feels well and like it's happy and it's like working normal hours, whatever those benchmarks are. I think a lot of leaders forget about them once the company starts performing well or better than they expected, because now you already met your target, and it's that comfort that comes with a certain level. Because we were talking about the challenge, to reiterate the whole thing. When there are no challenges, when it doesn't feel like a challenge, it's not fun, at least like for someone like you and me. But also, a challenge is the way to a goal. So when there are no challenges, there's no goals. And when there's no goals, you're just like running like a headless chicken. So ultimately, if you don't feel challenged at some point, and I would, as a, like with someone with a lot of stress, like I would make the claim that if there is no challenge, you're not really working in the right direction. So you need to reverse engineer, what am I doing and how am I positioning a challenge? Or what is my challenge right now? Like just to understand. And if you don't still feel a challenge, maybe you're not in the right space. Like maybe you want like something else from life. But there's definitely always the next obstacle that is quantifiable. And to wrap up, because I know that we've touched over an hour, in terms of like positioning those goals and moving towards like the next thing, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. AI is a fancy word. If you want to mention it, like that's fine. But I'm curious about your overview of like trends, innovation. What are you excited about? What you're seeing next? And just to hear your thoughts on like how the industry is moving.
I don't use AI a ton. I use it a bit. I know a lot of the people I work with use it. I do use it occasionally to give me a framework. Like I've done stuff like, I'll describe the situation and say, write a solution for this. And then I'll use that as my framework. I know that I haven't used it a ton, AI. As far as trends, it looks like to me that better ads are doing better. That's just what I noticed. I see from talking to people, the companies that have better ads don't seem to struggle. And maybe when I say better ads, I'm not talking about that they're funnier or that they're wittier or that they're slicker. I'm more talking that the people are thinking about what they're doing instead of just putting out like I was reading something the other day. Somebody was telling me that they made like X amount of ads and that they were doing great. And I was just like, I don't know if I believe that, because I have a lot of ads running. I've made a lot of ads before, and I never really think that volume is the answer if you don't have quality. Like you start with quality, then you can do volume. It's the same thing with emails. If you start sending out a lot of poorly written emails, you're going to be in trouble. And I think if you're doing good ads, then you can make a lot of ads. So what I've noticed the trend over the years is that my really bad ads years ago would probably not fly today. And so what I try to do now is try to make sure that I put a little bit of thought into the ads, a little bit more, and get the execution level as high as I possibly can, either in-house or using an outside source. And so I think the trend to pay attention to is doing a better job with the creative.
And would that be video, image, both?
It's everything, like, copy. So AI. So here's where I use AI. Sarah Levinger is one of my favorite people. And I have done a couple of times, talked to her, and we've done a tiny bit of work together, which I loved. And she uses AI to dissect reviews. And I've done that before too. As well, I think CT this Disruptor in one of his episodes details how he would break down and analyze customer reviews. And I did his program as well. His step-by-step. It's one, I don't know which one it is, but it's one of his videos. So that's where I have used AI. I took all the videos, imported them into a document, took that document, had given ChatGPT access to it, asked ChatGPT a series of questions to come up with some insights on reviews, and then also asked ChatGPT to write some ads for us. And then we looked at the ads and we're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, how does this, and then run those ads. So yes, I have used some AI.
And I'm curious, how much of that, because you mentioned the future is always just doing a better job. And I think what you're mentioning, just incremental positions, get something out there, but like figure it out, do a lot of research, then get the initial product, and then start like reiterating the different ads, make it better and better. Then once it's like working really well, scale it. So I'm curious, how much of that is reviews and how much of that is foreseeing the future? So essentially, how much of that is the past and how much is the future into putting a really good ad?
How much of what?
Yeah, I'm curious. So let's say, I think like with a lot of your ads, because they're in apparel, like there's the next season coming, right? So in my head, I was thinking about the creatives. Let's say that right now we will be taking the pictures for the winter, if it's not like already taken, if they're not already taken, and we'll be pushing that over like the next few months. In the last summer, towards like the end of the summer, like we're maybe doing a bit of like summer sale, but we're mostly pushing already falls like clothing. So a bit of like the ads, it's like foreseeing and like guessing what people will want to do, wear, say. But then you mentioned that you would load and Sarah would load a lot of the reviews. So how much of that would be what's trending and next? Like in terms of, let's say, in terms of importance, if you were to maybe even like split it by percentage, in terms of what's in the past, what works, what reviews, what we have in terms of feedback, and how much is what you're seeing in the future and what you're seeing next, like in the company.
Such a weakness of ours, but we don't advertise new products for the most part. We don't run ads to new products almost ever. So we advertise evergreen, and we only really advertise a certain small group of products, maybe like 3 to 5 products. Usually the majority of our marketing is created around those 3 to 5 products. So, and that's not to say that that's what we're selling. It's just that that's what we make ads on. And that's mostly just a bandwidth thing. It's not that we're like, oh man, we only make ads about these 3 to 5 products because those 3 to 5 products are our hottest sellers, and that's what we do. It was the ones we started out with. We continue to make ads on. It's a volume question, really. It's like having the bandwidth to make more creative. And when we branch out into making creative for the other products that we have, because we have a huge amount of SKUs, what ends up happening is we suffer because we don't know the angles as well. So we pretty much just stuck with advertising the products that we know will sell, and then trying to get people to buy the other ones through email. That has been our most strategy. And then as far as reviews, I would say I am the only person in the company who has ever placed a lot of value upon reviews, but I was able to make a loud enough statement about it that we have always stuck to it. Like I was using reviews 3 years ago. So it's a huge part of what we're doing. I don't think anybody else in the company ever put that much importance on it. I was always like the review guy. I'm the one who keeps the review document. So we have thousands and thousands of reviews on documents, and they're all broken down into 1 star, 2 star, 5 star, best reviews, worst reviews, reviews that mention certain products. We have like spreadsheet with 10,000 reviews on it. It's the same few thousand reviews, but it's 10,000 different ways broken up. And surveys as well. I would do surveys, and there's some tabs on my reviews sheet now that are surveys, because I think it's important to ask questions and then listen to answers, and it's priceless. The information that customer is going to give you is priceless. I just began on a new brand doing this, where they have some reviews. I think they have like 800 reviews, and I just started going in, and I found so much stuff in there, and I was like, hey guys, did you guys know this about and they're like, oh, we didn't know. I'm like, man, you guys are missing. Okay, this is going to be great. We're going to make a lot of money over here now because you guys didn't know about this. So I'm bringing to another company right now that's seven-figure company, really, bringing to them my way of doing things around reviews.
And I think I wanted to like wrap up with that because it's really like excites me a lot. I feel there isn't as much talk when it comes to like doing multiple 5 figures, getting even like onto the road of 9. I think you're very close to actually, turning. I mean, you're on the way there.
I have my way of doing things. I'm 51 years old. I come from the fire department. I have my way of doing things. I usually very stark with things. I'm like, okay, cool. You guys, somebody says, hey, this is my idea. And I'll be like, this is my idea. They say, okay, well, we don't want to use your idea. We want to use our idea. Okay, cool. Let's do it. And then if 60 days goes by and I didn't see their idea, panned out very well, and I'm going to be like, hey, listen, your idea kind of sucked. Let's try my idea now. And that doesn't fly sometimes. Sometimes people they don't want to hear that, they don't like that. So, but I'm 51 years old. It's hard for me to change. I could try to say it a little differently. Like, the return on investment on your idea was not so fabulous. So we might going to try my idea now. But, what ends up happening is somebody will be like, usually ask the question of, hey, what should we do to hit our goal this year? And I'm like, okay, cool. Why don't we do what I said this time? Because I've had a track record of success here. And sometimes people don't like that. They don't like to hear that from somebody. So it is what it is, and I'm probably not changing at this point. If they were looking for me to change, that it'd probably be easier for them to hit, $1 billion in sales this year than change me. So what ends up happening sometimes is people say, well, hey, we don't want to hear from you anymore that much. So I'm like, okay, cool.
I'm really excited about it because like there's a question I had in mind, and I know that you have that value, and I think it's like I'm curious about what's next specifically for this company on the road to like becoming a 9-figure brand. Because you mentioned we run evergreen like products, like we acquire people with that and we sell them in the emails, and like the email is doing like up to like half of the sales, like depending on like the month. So the email is like helping quite a bit. But I'm curious, like, do you think that the brand reinvents like the product, or like do you almost like start mini brands like within like this brand with a new product? I'm curious, like what is your thought process on like the growth outside of like maybe combine like with the wholesale when it comes to becoming a 9-figure brand, and maybe even beyond, from like being from like where it is right now?
I think that's not a question really for me. I'm more in the marketing. They're in the product development side. I would say I know that they are expanding the categories of offerings. So that is part of the road to 9 figures. But I don't think that that's their main focus, because the t-shirt market is massive, and they are one of the biggest growing players in the women's t-shirt market in the United States right now. There are 11-figure brands who are well aware of them and look at them like, oh, we wish we had them right now. There are multiple 11-figure brands out there that are aware of us and look at us longingly, wishing that they had us in-house, in other words, or as part of their brand. So, or, wish that they had the cachet that we have, that we, so you could grow this brand well beyond 9 figures without expanding categories to say sweaters or denim or jackets or sneakers or hats. They could just do straight t-shirts just the way they are and grow it to 9. That's my technical opinion on it, looking at the market. But from my point of view, we're planning to restructure things a little bit. So my wife has a showroom called Showroom Delphina, and Showroom Delphina is an agency business, and they're a wholesale agency. So much like you do email marketing, their skill is just simply that they do wholesale marketing to stores. So what we're going to do is we're going to run Perfect White Tees marketing from inside of Showroom Delphina. And we're expanding the offerings of Showroom Delphina to partner with people like yourself and Facebook ads and people who do CRO. And Showroom Delphina will bring the clients, and I will be there at Showroom Delphina, and we'll have somebody who's helping me. And the two of us will interface with people like yourself, and we will then execute marketing. And that, I think, will solve the issues that we've had in-house where, sometimes I'm kind of like a little rough around the edges, and people will now be like, oh, cool. He's still got his eye on things, but he's maybe not the one who's executing in-house. And that will benefit multiple companies because we're rolling it out to multiple brands.
In other words, you said that some of the challenges that can occur are internal communications and alignment between the different ideas, because as you grow into the company, there's different perspectives, and that can come with let's test your idea and let's test my idea. But then, so that is going to be solved. But then ultimately, what you're saying is that because of the demand that there is for the product, like product quality, just by doing more of what we do and spending more time in the market, this is the way that this brand is going to get into the 9 figures and probably going to get acquired. Or I'm not sure if that is the business strategy, but it sounds like 11-figure brands are craving for something like this to add to their portfolio.
I just know that, that they've contacted, and, we did a collaboration with an 11-figure brand recently it also sells t-shirts. American powerhouse, household name in department stores, been around for 40 years. We've had I know that I don't know what their plans are as far as are they going to get acquired? Do they want to get acquired? Do they want to? But I do know that they want to grow. That's what their plan is. I don't want to talk about what it is that they want to do because they know what they want to do. And I don't know that they would necessarily explain it to me in detail as to what their plan is. I do know that we're on track for above middle 8 figures for next year, possibly into 9 figures next year. That's what it looks like. I don't know what the end is going to be. I would have said last year my goal would have been to do $100 million in 2025. I don't know if that's going to be possible in 2025, but things could change because, there were times in 2021 when I didn't think we were going to break 6 figures a month, and then in 2022, we almost hit 7 figures in a single month.
Yeah. And now that's the norm. So it's very unpredictable what's going to happen. I think that's the beauty of marketing, and I'm going to iterate on. You mentioned never settling, always trying to grow, always trying to find even within what we're doing, how do we do it better and how do we improve? Just never settling. I think that mindset seems to be the winning mindset, because I think there's a lot of ways to be wrong, but probably only one way to be right, which is just to. There's actually as a caveat, there's probably multiple ways to be right as well. So there's definitely more ways to be right or to be wrong. But if there's something that you picked up that is right and works for you, I think it's definitely worth diving deeper into it. It's been very unpredictable over the last, this summer, speaking from email perspective, since February was weird with the DMARC changes. And there was the bot clicks, there was the Microsoft changes that they did. Maybe you don't even know if an AI hacked all of the email. That could be something that we won't even know or control. There's elections, there's global trends, wars happening. So staying
true
post-pandemic within that global economy, I think it goes to show that as long as you adapt and you try to improve incrementally, you can overcome any obstacle on the way, and then you can effectively win in the game of business that we play here. Cool. Like that was a bit of a wrap up. Like I felt like it felt like really good to say at the end. And it's like I want to appreciate your time. Like we spent an hour and a half like talking together. Is there anything you want to say where people follow you? What do you have going on next for you to wrap up this?
Say I'm most active on Twitter, although I haven't been very active there lately. I've been a little busy. So usually I kind of go under wraps when I'm busy. And right now is one of those times, so I haven't been posting at all. But I usually check in. If somebody replies to one of my tweets, I'll reply back. I haven't been crafting any tweets recently. We're also in a big state of flux with what's going on. We're setting up a lot of systems. We just hired somebody internally to do, that whole interaction between me and the other brands.
Yeah. Cool. So Twitter should go and follow you. I think you're resharing to a lot of people as well, but you're daily posting stuff of like things that you're doing. And I think that's what's become very exciting about just the form of documentation of learnings of scaling and growing, bad lessons, good lessons. So definitely worth the follow. Thanks so much. I really appreciate all the wisdom all the time, like, and all the lessons, insights from like growing an 8-figure brand, and can't wait to see like what comes next.
Thank you. Thank you.